There's a super interesting article out in The Hill today that's analyzing potential societal issues, especially gender-related ones. And I have a lot to say on this and some other things to add to this as well. But the headline of this article reads, "Most young men are single, most young women are not." So there has been a lot of talk about young male virginity rates, isolation, social issues, dating market imbalances between men and women. And so it's pretty interesting because you're starting to see that there are bad things coming out of this, and there's some analysis to be had here. I personally have my own opinions about this we're going to delve into. This article reads, more than 60% of young men are single, nearly twice the rate of unattached young women. I don't know what unattached in this context means. Signaling a larger breakdown in the social, romantic, and sexual life of the American male. So it's weird because how could it be possible that 60% of young men are single while it's twice the rate of unattached young women? Because the idea would be, who are young women dating then? And it looks like we potentially have an answer to this. Says men in their 20s are more likely than women in their 20s to be romantically uninvolved, sexually dormant, friendless, and lonely. They stand at the vanguard of an epidemic of declining marriage, sexuality, and relationships that afflicts all of young America. We're in a crisis of connection, said Niobe Way, a psychology professor and founder of the Project for the Advancement of Our Common Humanity at New York University. Disconnection from ourselves and disconnection from each other, and it's getting worse. And so this is definitely true. And honestly, what I think is at the heart of all of these issues is technology. I think technology has, not to be like, it's going to sound catastrophic, but, prepare yourself for what I'm about to say. I think technology is really destroying humanity because it's pushing people away from their human nature of being social creatures. That's our human nature, to be social with each other. But now everybody's just so addicted to their phone nonstop. And it's to the point where, because we're all so much on social media using our phones, we don't have basic social skills. We tether ourselves to not have social desires and just stay on social media. I was at the gym the other day. There was 3 benches. 3 motherfucks were taking them up, taking 6-minute rests in between their sets, just ticking on their phone. It's like, dude, are you at the gym or are you fucking using your phone, you idiot? It's like, it's so annoying. And so nobody knows how to talk to each other, which again, I'm also part of this criticism as well. As always, my criticisms pretty much always apply to me as well, because I'm not afraid of being self-critical like most people who are cowards. But we don't know how to speak to each other. We don't set that up. Actually, I'm not a Marxist, but, Marx had a lot of good criticisms of capitalism. And so, I was just reading the economic and philosophical manuscripts of 1844 and just learning about him and stuff. One of his big criticisms of capitalism was he wasn't against technology, but he was against this, deification of technology, this thing, because he thought, the wider of a gap that gets between human knowledge and technology, it's like the more useless the human actually becomes, right? Because you're just relying on technology. And I find when I'm doing basic stats work and I'm dealing with data sets, I'm typing in 12 minus 8 into the calculator. I'm like, holy shit, what the fuck? I don't know, that. I think that they're super right, and I think one of the other smears of Marx is the idea that he thought that there was no human nature; they were just able to be molded or whatever. No, he thought there was a very distinct human nature, one in which you are in nature, you are with your family, with friends. You don't turn social. The goal of social interactions is social interactions, whereas he has this thing called commodity fetishization, which you would think is fetishizing things, but that's not what it is. It's taking social interactions, and instead of those being the end goal and virtue in and of themselves, you take social interactions just so that you can get goods in exchange. So, I think that that's really the heart of our issue here. It says, in the worst case scenario, the young American man's social disconnect can have tragic consequences. Young men commit suicide at 4 times the rate of young women. Younger men are largely responsible for rising rates of mass shootings, a trend some researchers link to their growing social isolation. So this, I think, is controversial because they commit mass shootings and then they're looked at as the victim in this light. So I can definitely, I don't think they should be viewed as these full victims in that situation, obviously, right? So societal changes that began in the Eisenhower years have eroded the patriarchy that once ruled the American home, classroom, and workplace. Women now collect nearly 60% of bachelor's degrees. Men still earn more, but among the youngest adults, the income gap has narrowed to $43 a week. So basically, there's actually, I was reading about this macro level analysis of the dating market. I guess there's a new crisis of educated women, because at colleges, I think it's 60 to 40%. That's a big gap. A 20% gap in enrollment is actually really large, statistically speaking, very, very significant. And so women who get their bachelor's degree understandably only want other men with bachelor's degrees. But if there's only 40% to your 60%, it means that you're in a deleveraged position because there's less men than there is women. And that actually puts men in that position, men with bachelor's degrees, in a position of leverage and being able to mess around and not having to commit. Whereas if it was the reverse, they would have to commit in order to be able to, get what they're looking for, right? And then the income gap is really going to start to narrow over time. I mean, it's really going to start to, it's going to be pretty awesome to see just how like small it's going to be. It's already down just 43 a week. I don't know what that totals into over a year though. Well, like 43 times 50 or whatever. So it's like 2 G's, I think. It says, scholars say the new era of gender parity has reshaped relationship dynamics, empowering young women and in many cases removing young men from the equation. It definitely has, no doubt. Women don't need to be in long-term relationships. They don't need to be married. They'd rather go to brunch with friends and have a horrible date, said Greg Matos, a couple and family psychologist in Los Angeles who recently penned a viral article titled, "What's Behind the Rise of Lonely Single Men?" So this is the article here in Psychology Today. It says men need to adjust their deficits to meet healthier relationship expectations. As younger and middle-aged men are the loneliest they've been in generation, is probably going to get worse. It's not my typical rosy view of relationships, but a reality nonetheless. Over the last 30 years, men have become a larger portion of the growing group of long-term single people. And while you don't actually need to be in a relationship to be happy, men typically are happier and healthier when partnered. I think everybody, really needs a relationship to be happy. I think that's another bullshit thing that people kind of say, like, oh, like, you should be happy by yourself. But in human nature, humans are not meant to be happy alone. They're meant to be, your happiness is really literally dependent upon your relations and interactions with other people. That's how we're built. That's how we're evolutionarily wired to survive, right? All of our personal likings and things we take liking to are because of our evolutionary traits, and that's one of them. You needed to talk to other people to be able to barter and get goods and get help and not be killed. That's why why do you think we have so much anxiety when we stand up in front of the classroom to talk? It's because of that very like deeply held evolutionary fear of pissing off the mob, right? They could kill you or they could ostracize you. So it's like all of that, right? So it's like we do need social relationships to be happy. I wonder if that's like another bullshit marketing tool from technology companies and social media platforms. I wonder if that's something that they've pushed too. But anyways, this is a big one right here. It says relationship standards and skills deficits. This is for men. This means a relationship skill gap that, if not addressed, will likely lead to fewer dating opportunities and longer periods of being single. There's less patience for poor communication skills today. The problem for men is that emotional connection is the lifeblood of healthy long-term love, and it requires all the skills that families still are not consistently teaching young boys. So that's interesting, because this is even more like, this is also still like blaming, not putting the blame on men. So this gets really controversial in terms of where you place the blame on this stuff. This guy's already going. So the skills deficit, I think, is a huge part of this, like ginormous part of this. Because what I think it is I think, previously, right, the whole thing was men worked and then the woman was at the house. And so, your value as a man was being a provider, right? Providing, that's what it was. That was your value that was given. But I think men now are in a state of, they feel entitled to a partner, entitled to a woman, like you're entitled to a relationship. You're not entitled to one. You have to be able to, what do you bring to the table? You have to be able to attract a mate. I think if a lot of a lot of men just like understood that, or were like you told them that, I think it would help them understand it more. I think a lot of them think like, oh, you're just guaranteed, like you're just entitled one. You're not. You have to be able to, be able to meet the demands of the person that you're trying to court. That's the way it works. And so all you have is a job. Well, she has a job now too. So what do you have? Like you have to have something. And so there's just a shift in the supply demand curve essentially, because women now want a man with a job, obviously understandably so, especially in this economy. But you also have to be able to do other things like cook and clean, like do laundry and stuff like that. Like a lot of men, most men don't even do most basic shit like cleaning up crumbs after yourself, vacuuming, doing laundry, like cooking. Like those are just like crazy concepts to them. And so it's just like you have no skill whatsoever outside of just like working your job. So it's a mismatch when it comes to these kinds of desires and things. I think that the biggest thing is going to be that. But I think it's just like, in the previous patriarchal system, I'd say we can all agree that that's what it was, like undebatably, right? Just factually speaking, men took advantage of women, cheated, etc. They're really shitty. Anybody that gets power is going to abuse it. It's just the way it goes, right? And so now women are saying, hey, like, we're not going to take this. And why would a woman honestly commit if the dude's just going to cheat anyways? Like, what's the point? And you're just like some trash dude that can't clean up after yourself or cook or do anything. It's just like, why would she be with you? It just doesn't make any sense. So it's like, you need to adapt. Just like anytime something happens in any kind of market, like you have to adapt. You know what I mean? You have to adapt to whatever situation you're in. If newspapers go out of business because nobody wants newspapers anymore, you got to switch to podcasts or you got to switch to the internet. Like, you have to adapt. You can't just be like, oh, I'm entitled to this. It's just like this weird entitlement thing that's just so bizarre. And so no doubt technology has created this. Dating apps, statistically speaking, are really, really bad. It says the only problem is that upwards 62% of users are men, and many women are overwhelmed by the number of options they have. Men are very, very not picky when they're on dating apps swiping, and so there's just tons of that. And so women are just so overflooded with people that there's just no way to even sift through it. So it's just a complete disaster. I think there's unanimous agreement that this whole dating app thing has been a complete disaster. I think that there's pretty much universal unanimity amongst men and women that, this is just a colossal failure. I personally think the better system is the voucher system, where you have somebody and then they have a friend that they're like, oh, hey, you should meet this person, and then you can meet them. I think that's the best because that person knows you, you trust them because you're friends with them, and then they're able to link you up with somebody so they know who you are. And then there's that aspect of a connection, and then it's not like marriage or anything. You just, go on a date or whatever to see if it works out or not. I think that's the ideal system. Not your parents setting you up, although that's not the worst thing in the world, but I don't think that's the best way. I think that's the best way personally. I think the whole dating app thing, or even finding someone randomly, I think those systems they're just not good. I don't think they're efficacious. It says recent years have seen a historic rise in unpartnered Americans, particularly among the young. The pandemic made things worse. As of 2022, Pew Research Center found 30% of U.S. adults are neither married, living with a partner, nor engaged in a committed relationship. Nearly half of all young adults are single, 34% of women, and a whopping 63% of men. Not surprisingly, the decline in relationships marches astride with the decline in sex. The share of sexually active Americans stands at a 30-year low. Around 30% of young men reported in 2019 that they had no sex in the past year, compared to about 20% of young women. So this lack of sex, I guess you could ask the question of if that's a good or bad thing. I think that's a bad thing, because having a reasonable amount of sexual action is just part of being a healthy human being. So I think that is a bad thing, assuming you're looking for it. If you're not, but it depends on the context of that. If you just get pissed because you can't get any action and then you say no, it's that's not really the same as being I just don't want to. Says only half of single men are actively seeking relationships or even casual dates. According to Pew, that figure is declining. You have to think that the pandemic had an impact on some of those numbers. I think that's a lot of dudes who are just frustrated with not being able to find anybody, and so they're just fuck it, I quit, basically. It says young men are watching a lot of social media. They're watching a lot of porn, and I think they're getting a lot of their needs met without having to go out, and I think that's starting to be a habit. Porn is also actually very bad for society. I think it's really, really bad, especially with all the OnlyFans stuff. It's leading to a lot of, addiction issues. It's a drug, it's a drug. And so anytime you have a drug, it's a human doesn't have the proper controls over something like they normally do. And so it's just bad because you lose control over it. Reasonable controls you can have over stuff, generally, they don't know. That same rationality doesn't apply to drugs. And that's what it is. And it's it leads to this objectification of women, it's perverted brain, and just the content just gets more and more intense and hardcore. It's just bad. You know what I mean? It warps your views of sex. I think porn is just terrible. It's really horrible. Really, really bad for society. It says even seasoned researchers struggle to fully account for the relationship gap between women and men. If single young men outnumber single young women nearly 2-1, then who are all the young women dating? Some of them are dating each other. Interesting. 1/5 of Generation Z identifies as queer, and research suggests bisexual women make up a large share of the young adult queer community. I think that a lot of the population is actually bisexual, but not willing to admit it. That's my personal belief. I think that you can see in nature and animals and stuff like that, you see a lot of bisexuality. And I think it just makes a lot of sense. because then you would be fulfilling your reproductive needs of like evolutionary wise, and then you would also be basically be able to you would also be able to do, your other stuff or whatever. But I think it's a societal thing, because I think women, it's always been more accepted to be a lesbian than it is to be a gay dude, just societally, for whatever reason. I don't know why it's considered that way. It's weird how like those kinds of societal things come up. And so I think that that's a big part of it. I don't think that women are gayer than dudes, unless there's data that truly would prove that. I think it's a very heavy societal thing, because it's much more societally acceptable to be lesbian than it is to be gay. So that's interesting. So I guess a bunch of them are dating each other. That could do that. It says young women are also dating and marrying slightly older men, carrying on a tradition that stretches back more than a century. The average age at first marriage is around 30 for men, 28 for women, according to census figures. That would only account for like a couple years, though. I mean, the age gap, the typical age gap is like 4 years or something like that. So it's like, I don't feel like that's not a big enough age gap to statistically impact it, but I guess I'm not sure. It says heterosexual women are getting more choosy. Women don't want to marry down to form a long-term relationship to a man with less education and earnings than herself, said Ronald Levant, professor emeritus of psychology at the University of Akron and author of several books on masculinity. In previous generations, young women entered adulthood in a society that expected them to find a financially stable man who would support them through decades of marriage and motherhood. Over the 1950s and 60s, that pattern gradually broke down, and today is all but gone. Women are tired of their stereotypical roles. Full-time therapists for emotionally distant men. They want a partner who is emotionally open and empathetic, the opposite of the age-old masculine ideal. Today in America, women expect more from men, Levant said, and unfortunately so many men don't have more to give. And I think that the former is not an issue. Like, women expecting more from men, like women being like, hey, like, I would like it if you knew how to cook something other than like scrambled eggs, or like, hey, like, you should be able to do your own laundry, or hey, like, you should clean up after yourself when you eat at the table, don't leave crumbs on the table. It's like, that's pretty reasonable, I would say. Like, I think that that's a very reasonable thing to do. And so to me, the biggest part of this is just like men just need to learn to be more valuable. It's just like, I don't know, there's this weird like privilege that like is so inherent privilege that men have, where it's just like, oh, like you're just entitled to everything and you're just a victim in every situation. It's like in any market, you have to adjust to whatever the conditions are. And so it's like, yeah, the market has shifted now. Women are now working, so the demands of women have shifted, right? And so it's like you have to adapt to that. It's so like this crazy level of entitlement that's just like so bewildering and baffling. Like, I want to say, where does it come from? But it's kind of like, okay, they've been in power for all this time, so I guess it makes sense why. But it's just so laughable, just like the level of entitlement. Like, it's like, oh, like demands change, but we're just not going to follow the supply curve that needs to. Like, we're just not going to follow that movement. Like, what? It's hilarious. This is the same emotional deficits that hurt men in the dating pool also hamper them in forming meaningful friendships. 15% of men report having no close friendships, a 5-fold increase from 1990, according to research by the Survey Center of American Life. Men are less naturally relational than women, said Richard Reeves, a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, whose new book Of Boys and Men has drawn wide praise. Reeves points to a recent Saturday Night Live sketch that reimagined the neighborhood dog park as a man park, poking fun at this reliance of men on women to do the emotional lifting for them. So this definitely, it says women form friendships with each other that are emotionally intimate, whereas men do not. Young women may not be dating, but they have girlfriends they spend time with and gain emotional support from. Men, I do wonder what the science says about if men are less social than women. That's an interesting question to me. It definitely seems like it. One big thing I see is men, at least especially myself, like it's just hard to like do bullshit talk. We're just talking more so for the purpose of talking as opposed to actually like saying anything. I find that really, really difficult. But the problem is if you're trying to establish a relationship with somebody, like a friendship, right? It's like you have to bullshit in the beginning because like, I don't fucking know you. Who are you? I don't even know what you're interested in. So it's like you have to bullshit in the beginning, but it's really, really difficult. I think women are just better than that because women just talk and talk and talk just I don't even know how you guys talk that much, bro. Like just so much, just all the time. About just anything, dude. So it's like I think that puts women in a better position to be able to establish friendships and relationships because that initial like startup capital that you need, that initial like just being able to break through with some random crap. It's just like something random, trivial, whatever, just totally out of the blue. That's definitely something I want to get better at, is like that bullshit talk, but I don't know how to improve on that. How to be able to just be like, it just feels so cringe. It's like, I don't know, it's like you're talking for the purpose of talking as opposed to talking for the purpose of saying something, right? Those are the two different things. That's the difference between bullshit talking and like actual talking to me. I'm definitely not good at that. But it's very, very harmful because it does make social relations very, very difficult when you can't bullshit talk. But very interesting article here. We definitely have societal issues, but I think we really need to rein back. I think we need like a national fight against technology. But I think we have a lot of our societies just tech zombies that are all just going to defend technology as if it's a good thing. I know I've gotten some pushback from just saying that it's bad. Technology is really horrible. Another thing is like the actual science says that political learning from social media is literally zero, like it's non-existent, whereas like traditional news media sources actually showed actual significant amount of political learning, which is also really depressing because it's information overload. The algorithms increase misinformation, the spread of misinformation. You have narrowcasting as opposed to broadcasting. So it's like, you're specifically narrow tailoring it. You're watching secular talk instead of watching, whatever broadcasting network like it was in the 50s or whatever and stuff like that. So I think technology is just taking us away from our nature. And I think by being these TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat zombies, we're not having social relationships. We don't know how to talk to each other. And it takes us away from our human nature. And I think that is a bad thing. And what is the future of humanity post-technology? I don't really know, honestly. I'm not really sure. Because do we adapt to technology, or do we say, oh man, like technology really like is fucking us. Like we need to screw it and like let it off. So I'm curious what you guys' thoughts are on technology. Let me know if you think that when I say technology, I don't literally mean all technology, but what I mean is technology in its form today. Like technology in 2005, 2010 wasn't that bad. You still had a lot of social interactions. You still went to Blockbuster. And a big really issue now, I think, is options. I think we're just overloaded with too many options of everything. And so it's like, oh, like at least when I used to go, when you would go to Hollywood Video or Blockbuster, the most movies you would rent is 5 movies maximum. Like that was the cap. You weren't going to rent more than that at once. Like there just wasn't going to happen. Now on Netflix, you have like a million options. You open up Netflix, there's like a million options. That's hypothetically great, right? But what if it's a paradox of too many options? What if too many options is actually bad? Because we know as humans, we have a limited capacity of focus and ability to choose and that kind of thing. So I used to be able to watch, I used to be able to have like one DVD, one movie, watch it 3 times back to back to back, or have like a DVD of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles that had like 6 episodes on it, and I could watch that for weeks, the same 8 episodes, weeks. And so it's like we've lost that ability to be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna watch this movie 2 or 3 times back to back to back. Like that just doesn't happen anymore. Because why would you? You have a million options at your fingertips, right? And it's just like, dude, like, we've lost the quality of things. Everyone just is all about clout now as opposed to anything quality. It's all about money, cars, how many views and likes do you have? It's never about, oh, what's the quality of, wow, this person's video was really high quality. You never hear that as a flex. It's always like, oh yeah, I got this many views, I have this many subscribers, I have this car, I have this, oh, look at how my girl looks or whatever. And it's just like, come on, bro. Like, what kind of a society are we where we're valuing that kind of crap and we have no ability to actually appreciate things and enjoy them because we just have so many options for so many things, on Instagram where you can just look up anything you want or click on anything, and there's just Google. You can Google anything you want. Literally everything is at your fingertips. Maybe it was better having to go to the library. I personally think it is better to have to go to the library to research something. Information overload just isn't good for the brain. And again, like I said, scientific studies show political learning is zero. Political learning from social media is zero. It's literally none. It's none. And so what we know, one of the reasons for that is information overload. It's too much information. You can't take it in. Are we going to evolve to match technology, or are we going to say, oh, fuck technology, we need to save whatever, our evolutionary traits currently are? I don't know, but super fascinating, like macro level societal stuff. But we need to move more towards being social with each other and away from tech.